What is going up, everybody? Going on. I'm already triggered, honestly. I got triggered like 19 seconds before the show. Redbeard said the phrase fancy do. I just can't. Boys, how are you guys doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Just got back from Vegas, so I'm on the water train this week.
Yeah, that post Vegas couple days of just like water and fucking steamed vegetables, man. Let me tell you.
I'm doing great. I got a, as you so kindly mentioned, a fancy do on the way. Mrs. Beard is bringing me a fancy do.
I hate it so much. I hate everything about it.
I woke up today and I was just like, you know what? Let's trigger Fane instantaneously.
Bro, you've been doing it for like hours now. We had like 3 hours of you just trying to trigger me in Discord earlier today.
I was helping you win at poker earlier today.
That's fair. When you left, I did lose. So, but everybody, welcome to Two Guys in a Bar, your favorite Wednesday night Ashes of Creation talk show where we talk all things, and sometimes it's not even about Ashes of Creation. Sometimes we're just talking about random ass stuff. But chat, hope you guys are all doing well tonight, boys.
Before we get into the Druid release talk.
Okay. Yeah.
Your background looks fucking dope. This is the first time I'm seeing it with the lights and everything.
So I've got some pictures that are just those are just sort of placeholder. These are I can show you one. The Drop Bear got these for me in I can't even grab it in New Orleans. There's an artist there that does these like Yoda prints in various styles. Steph Littlebird Fogel. Shout out to Steph Littlebird Fogel. They're amazing. I like them.
Just waiting for somebody in chat to be like, "Oh, I know him."
Yeah. No. I know.
Hey, Fane, guess what was just delivered?
What? Oh my god. Oh yeah, I didn't even say. I'm drinking 2020 Robert Bialy Black Chicken. Lil Zinfandel tonight. I felt like classing it up because I knew you were gonna bring a 14-year-old girl's drink to the table. Jeez. So big oh, okay, I actually have a leak. I have a PI leak, something that we learned in the meeting, guys. This is really important.
Rangers canceled?
We were told. And this is under NDA, and I'm going to lose my PI for this, but we were told that they do not allow dogs in their office. The building owner does not allow dogs in the office, and I think that that's just an absolute travesty.
The game's going to fail now.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. How can you even work without dogs in the office? It's insane.
I'm just surprised every month we haven't gotten more dog artwork,
That's
People
true.
just pining for their...
Well, that's because Maggie's in charge of the community side of stuff, and she is disproportionately favoring cats. And as a dog lover, I feel as though I'm not represented in the Intrepid community.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
I have a bone to pick with Maggie now.
So, guys, pretty much what we're
can
saying
they
is
bring cats to the office?
You cannot bring pets to the office. You can't.
Pets.
The only pet, apparently, they have a when a new hire comes on, they give them a Tamagotchi, and they have to keep it alive for the first week that they work there. And
Or what about a flour sack baby, like in high school?
and apparently, two revelations. One, you can pause the old school Tamagotchis. So some people have been a little cheating a little bit, a little pay to win. I don't know. And two, they did mention some people who definitely let that Tamagotchi die. So
and now they work for New World.
And now they work for New. One of them does. One of them does. That is 100% true.
Oh, we're having too much fun tonight.
It's gonna be a good night. I feel the energy. I really do. So boys, let's goddamn, let's just get into it. Because everyone's here for it, right? We actually have Baba showing up for the first time ever in the history of this show, showing up to do it. Let's talk about...
I'm pretty sure I saw a first-time chatter under his name earlier.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. I don't know how he got that mod badge, but we need to check in on... after the show, we're going to check in on some security stuff to make sure he's not getting in, logging in on himself, or I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on. But, Druid, the Druid class. You guys excited? New Druid class? Ranger canceled. Druid announced. Let's go. Big news coming
Big
up.
hype.
Big hype.
But here's the thing: the druid's going to be able to shapeshift into a ranger.
Oh,
It's actually
So it's.
I heard
it's
it
a
was
little
going to
bit
be
of
able to shapeshift into a teleporter, and then everybody around you could utilize the teleporter to teleport anywhere they want.
Yes. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
That's also
This
also-
line-
one of
this
its
line is
other
gonna-
abilities.
Yeah, no, this line's going to blow completely out of proportion before Ashes launches. Druids are going to be the most OP class in any game ever.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we should just like, this is the kind of concept is like people say birds aren't real. Birds are government drones that are spying on us and they land on the power cables we just need to spread this conspiracy
Charge,
theory.
yeah.
They charge themselves on the power cables, like wireless charging. But Ranger, let's get serious. Ranger. Y'all hyped to see Ranger?
Yeah, I mean, another class reveal is always good.
When did we get the previous classes?
Alpha
It
1.
was like before
Pre-Alpha 1.
Alpha 1.
But
Yeah.
like way before. It was like before Alpha 0.
I'm gonna YouTube and check the date real quick.
All right, you YouTube and
going.
check the date, and Bartek and I will just keep the conversation going and break the fourth wall while we're doing that. It seems like a really good idea. So, I guess the big question that everyone has, right, is, are we going to see a ranger in the same way that we saw these? If you guys don't remember the cleric, the tank, and the mage videos, they came out. They showed off 5 or 6 skills, roughly. They didn't show all of them, did they? Maybe they did.
All the ones we had access to in testing.
So they showed like a full 10 skills then, right? So they showed all the base skills that these classes would have. Are we going to get something like that for the ranger, or are we just getting ranged combat featuring the ranger, brought to you by Mountain Dew Fancy Drink?
I would like to think we're getting like 5 to 10 abilities at least. Because like he didn't say ranged combat update. He said preview of the ranger. I mean, I guess that argument goes both ways. But
well, it's kind of the cart before the horse, right? Because we haven't seen fighter, but we saw the melee combat. It makes sense that we next see ranged basic combat, maybe with a little ability thrown in there. Like that's kind of the counter argument that's been going around the Ashes streets recently, is that we are seeing one. Are we going to actually eventually see the other? Like, are we going to actually eventually get the ranger, or are we just getting everything now and that's how good and it's done and we can start talking about fighter and rogue and summoner and bard?
I feel like it won't be done, but they are very careful nowadays about not releasing things unless they're pretty sure on it. So I could see them giving us a lot less, even though they have a lot more fleshed out, and just being like, yeah, we're not going to show this because then people will read into it way too deep, and then they'll be upset when we change things.
Yeah. Hard agree.
So the video is only saying a year ago. It's not giving like the exact month or anything.
Okay.
So about a year ago, pre-Alpha 1. If I remember correctly, I want to say it was maybe a month before Alpha 1, like before official Alpha 1.
Sounds
really
about right for the video.
I feel like we had it
released
before.
a bunch of stuff before that.
I feel like we had it before the.
So it was before Alpha 1, but then Alpha 1 got pushed back. So it might have been a couple of months. It might have been 2 months before Alpha 1.
I feel like it was like December. November, December. Because that would still show us 1 year, right? Anything that's
a year and a half ago.
A year and change. Anything that is below 2 years but over 1 year is going to show us 1 year. It would be really interesting to see. Hopefully someone in chat really knows and can throw it out there. So if anyone wants to do some deep dive research. But it's been a long time since we've gotten a new class. It's been a long
I don't think we're
time.
getting that for this.
Okay.
I will be very surprised if we're getting that for the live stream on Friday. I think we are getting exactly what we got in the melee combat, basic combat attack overview, where we technically saw the fighter, we saw the weapon master, and that was confirmed that we were looking at the fighter abilities. Regardless of him using the dagger or the sword or anything like that, they were the fighter abilities. I think we're going to see the same thing. I think we're going to see ranger, and we're going to see some of the basic ranger abilities. And I don't foresee them really. I think Steven will maybe talk in depth about what he's wanting for the Ranger, and maybe even divulge some information about some augments that they're looking at.
Okay.
But I don't think we're going to kind of see like the visuals that go along with that, right? I think it's going to continue to be a lot of Steven talking, but the primary showcase is going to be, hey guys, this is the type of range combat we're looking at. Here's action, here's tab. Maybe show off some new monsters. Yeah.
Do you think that we will see more than one weapon like we did for the fighter? Because we saw the daggers, we saw the two-hand, and then we saw one more, didn't we?
We saw
No, just the daggers and the two-handed greatsword. But they had the hammer, the ability that looked like a hammer, but that didn't matter what weapon was being used.
That's right.
So do you think we're going to see any of the like ranged magical weapons like the tombs or anything like that? Or do you think it's just going to be bow in some form of range combat?
The hype is around Ranger reveal right now, I wouldn't be surprised if we only saw bow, but I think that it would be an opportune time to also show the magic side, because we haven't seen that since pre-alpha, or I guess technically in alpha. And so we haven't seen that since the most recent iterations of combat change. So I think it would behoove them to show both the magic and the physical range combat. But I could see them sticking to just the bow.
Do you think they will show us some kind of camouflage ability by the Ranger? Because a while ago, Steven made that very specific confirmation that other classes may have some kind of light stealth abilities, but the true stealth will only be for rogues.
Well, we've been confirmed based on Steven's word that camouflage is a Ranger ability. And I think, I still want the whole, it starts with Steven controlling the character, and then like Hunter comes out of nowhere, stealth rogue and like attacks Steven or something like that. Like, I think that would be the best way to kind of showcase the stealth mechanic, to kind of see if you can, because that's a great way to demonstrate it, right? Can you see him coming in? Do we pick it up while we're watching it live? But anyways, to the question exactly, I think it is very possible, because that might have been one of those things that he's sitting there like, okay, what do we want to show in Ranger? What are some different abilities we want to show? Do we feel that stealth is in a good enough place to kind of show? And, he'll give his 30 million, prefaces ahead of time. It's still testing, iteration upon iteration. I think we could see it. I would say it's probably a 50-50 chance. Like, I wouldn't hedge my bets really either way. I think it's reasonable to assume so, and I think it's reasonable to assume not, because stealth might not be as far enough along yet.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you guys. What do you not want to see out of not Ranger, but ranged combat in this game? What is going to be a turn off? Like, you're going to be worried about how ranged combat's going to work?
I've got one, but I want Redbeard to go first because mine's going to take us down a whole deep path. We're going to get into some nasty, nasty discussion.
Something I don't want to see with ranged combat. I think it's hard to tell just from a kit or a mechanical standpoint. I feel like ranged combat is a very simple thing, and comparing it to melee combat to kind of nailed down in the general direction that they've been going. I'm not necessarily concerned that they're going to reveal anything from the mechanical side that's going to just put me off. Any of my concern with ranged combat side would be how it is essentially utilized in like PvE and PvP situations where you're actually like fighting a target, stuff like how far of a range you can have. But I think all of that just kind of gets fleshed out during testing. So I don't know if I actually really have one thing as it pertains to range that I don't want to see. The general stuff with combat, like I don't want it to feel floaty. Like in some MMOs when you're using a bow, as you're pulling the bow back to shoot, because of the stance that your legs are taking. When you move, when you strafe left or right, you're just kind of floating left or right because the legs are going off of the weapon animation rather than the walking animation. So, I mean, that's nitpicking it down to a very specific thing, but I would like it to feel like if there is movement while doing range combat, that it makes sense, that there's not like the animation doesn't override the player input.
So the one before we go down Fanes, I guess the one thing for me I don't want to see is basically making it so that you have to play in action combat because you get some kind of benefits or buffs for being in action combat, to the point where if you're just a casual player, you cannot play range combat because someone out there, like everyone's going to want to be Shroud playing range combat.
Yeah.
And it's like the skill ceiling is so high on that range combat that no one even wants to play with you if you can't play like that.
Yeah,
so
it becomes just unreasonable.
Right?
Like you need to be, if you were going out and playing like CS:GO or Valorant today, if you're not Ascendant or higher, you don't get to play Ranger, right? Because you just don't have that skill shot ability in you.
Is that by not incentivizing it? I don't know if that issue actually still like doesn't go away, because I feel like if somebody, let's say Fane, you suck at shooters.
Yeah.
Let's say that let's say that Fane wants to play in action because he really enjoys that, but he sucks at it. Regardless of whether there's a benefit or not, everybody around him might be telling him, just go tab. You keep missing your shots, you're trash. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that, even though there's no incentive to be in action, I don't know if it necessarily avoids the situation. And I think that that's fine. And I like your idea as long as it's more so coming from the side of it will help mitigate that situation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's always...
It's unavoidable.
Yeah,
like,
there's
trash players are trash.
Yeah, there's always going to be that. But that's why I don't play shooters, because I never really played them when I was younger. And when I do get on, I just get owned. And I'm like, this isn't really fun anymore. Mm-hmm. And so what I'd like, I mean, it is about finding a good balance for sure, so that people can play whatever they choose to, or like a combination, right? Where like I kind of would like to see it like League of Legends, where you click on someone, your auto attacks just automatically hit, right? Mm-hmm. But you have big skill abilities and your skills and stuff. That's something you have to aim, and landing those make a much bigger difference.
Would the New World approach be okay? Do you think? What was it for range? It was headshot, headshot, but it was just an instant crit. It wasn't more damage. I mean, technically, obviously, critting is more damage. So the higher your aim skill and your projectile, perception and being able to land those shots, the more damage you could do. But I don't think it was uber punishing to just be like, you know what? It's harder for me to hit the headshots. I'm going to go for the body shots. I mean, like an Overwatch, body shot Widow versus a headshot Widow. Yes, you can see the difference of the impact, but damage is damage. And so it's not like, it's more of a meme to say like, oh, body shot Widow can still two-shot you. So, but then from the melee side, then anything behind, the back 180 of the target is also instant crit for melee. What do you guys think about a system like that existing in Ashes?
I don't know if I like the back system being insta crit, because then like kiting is just, it becomes too it promotes a kiting mentality.
I also feel like it diminishes, like I was just throwing it out there. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it or not. I also feel like it diminishes the crit stat to where now the excuse is, well, don't stack crit, just hit crits forehead. And I hate that excuse, even though it's used all the time in shooters. Just click on their heads forehead. And it's not always that easy, and it's not always that, the situation doesn't always present you to be able to stand in the crit. No, I'm talking in MMO space. MMO space. I'm shooters, I agree.
I'm memeing shooters, on you. In shooters, it's hard too. Let me tell you about a guy that counter strafes or wide swings. It's rough. But But I think you make a good point there. Of if I can stack 30% crit, a 30% crit rate, well, this other guy's going to be more powerful because he just hits his headshots. And now that does give us both a path, a separate path, but yet a path to be able to contribute. But at the end of the day, if that guy's just going to naturally crit and can stack elsewhere, I'm just going to be a worse player. And so then it just cycles back,
But then you're also running into the power creep issues where you haven't had to stack crits, so you stacked other stats,
Mm-hmm.
and then everyone's saying, well, you can't play this crit build because it's not powerful enough to be brought along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And then I also don't want to see like that ranger out there like stacking enough defensive stats that they're doing shitloads of damage because they're hitting like headshots, but you also can't fucking kill them because they put all their other stuff into defensives.
Well, and if you have to hit skill shots, and this is kind of a baseline, and this will be more of in a PvE style of things. If you have to hit headshots on a boss, then naturally that boss's movement mechanics are less interesting because they have to give you a chance. It's going to be a pun, but they have to give you a shot at it. Right? They have to give you something to if the boss is doing 3 backflips and a left spin and running around on the walls and then charging straight at somebody, you don't get to do that if this headshot mechanic exists.
Yeah.
Right?
That would also, if they did the headshot mechanic for every single ranged attack, then it would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you end up with headshot mechanics only for like physical ranged attacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to end up with these weird positioning things where you need to be positioned in a way that you can hit headshots for the fight. And at that point, then you're going to be like, well, we're just not going to take rangers because they do similar damage. Like, a mage can do similar damage and they can be anywhere. Yeah. So, I don't like it for PvE. I don't like headshots really at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of leaning more towards just like natural crits, like as you hit.
Yeah.
And then like hit scan if you want to go into action. Because there are reasons to go into action combat, like for hitting further away shots or something. Maybe you can hit shots from a further distance if you like plan the hit scan right. I don't know exactly how you do that.
That's a great way to solve it, honestly, is whatever the in-game thing is. If you are over 30 meters away from the person, you are in action combat. You have to aim and shoot at them. You cannot tab onto them for your auto ability unless you're within 30 meters. And then you need to keep them within 30 meters so that there's always a chance of danger. And you don't get to just like lock on from 200 meters away, fire a bunch of automatic headshots, or just fire a bunch of automatic shots. And by the time they even get to you, they're dead. That's not interesting to tab pull.
I'm a little bit concerned with that idea because the way that it's been talked about is that the players are going to be able to pick their abilities based on what they take out of the talent tree.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to essentially define whether you're, in some combination of 70-30 or less percentage tab or action.
Yes.
So it's not, I would be concerned about the idea of if somebody's tabbed, but then clicks on a target and then it switches. Like, I don't know how that would be implemented in because they're already predefined as tab or action before they get into the fight.
I'm not necessarily talking abilities. I'm more talking like your base, your auto attack, your base attack, right?
Okay. So if they're outside of so maybe action abilities would have a further range. It wouldn't be defined by the ability says 70 yards or something like that.
My action ability, I can do 1 to 100 yards. My tab ability, I can only do within 50 yards and closer. So I will hit 100% of the time, in theory, when they're close. But when they're far away, it's going to take a little more skill. And that means that I need to have that skill to be able to pull them because I will be getting so much more damage on them as they try to gap close. I think something like that is totally reasonable. Also, those numbers are arbitrary.
Right. Yeah. Just
I think a little bit, and you kind of mentioned it there. I know it's supposed to be yes and, but I'm more going the no but route right now. But
yeah.
I think the concern there is the melee, and you kind of mentioned it there is I don't know how melee are able to contend with that because one of the biggest issues that melee have against ranged is the range factor.
Yeah.
And if we're then increasing the range at which range can be at, that then balancing for the melee to be able to get to them. Well, now let's say there's somebody who's as tab as they want to, as they can be, and they are having to be within that 50 yards. but the melee has gap closer up to 75 yards. Now it sways the advantage more into the melee side because once I get there's a lot of balancing with it, right?
Well,
it's
to me,
it's
where that
concerning.
balancing comes in then becomes about using other people's abilities and mounts. So then I'm just thinking of a siege, right? Where if you go into action, you can take long pot shots, but hey, you have a shield wall, like 3 tanks in a row with people marching behind them, and you're going in, and that's either negating the shots or taking severely reduced damage or whatever it is. Or you want to do a big charge with mounts, or you had your rangers. You can't just go in and gap close freely as a melee. You have to wait until your rangers make them take cover or whatever it is. It adds more strategy rather than just Zerg versus Zerg, everyone push in a ball. Because if you're just in a big ball pushing in together and the enemy has 300 yards of action combat just raining down on you, you're suddenly like, oh, this doesn't feel so good.
Yeah,
you bring up a good point there, because I was definitely thinking of it more on the 1v1 side, and they've already said they're not balancing for 1v1.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
So you can't our range needs to get on their range. If you need to push them, then we have gap closers. Everyone punish the ranger first, punish the mage next, whatever the rotation can be. It just is, that's the big thing, is it needs to be balanced. And we've seen gap closers, right? We saw with the we know that there's going to be a blink ability for the mage. It's going to be, which is an engage or a disengage. We know there's going to be the charge ability for the fighter, and we saw the tank's javelin, which was already toxic. I don't know if you guys remember pushing in those sieges, trying to push through, and you're like, okay, back out to the sides, and if you got selected by the hands of the gods of tanks, you were getting javelined right back into that little choke.
I mean, I was literally just go in, tabbed, and then just spam javelin till it hit, and then just run away till the javelin was back up, and just do it over and over.
I was spamming tab. I was spamming tab until I saw Hunter or Steven Sharif. Then I would javelin.
All right, boys.
So real quick before you go on to the thing that you don't want, Bard brought up a point here, and it pertains to ranged combat. It popped into my head. In that situation of where you have the tank line in front of you, and as a ranged combat you're firing, do friendly ranged projectiles stop on a friendly target if they are in the way?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
I would say yes. They don't do damage, but they don't carry through. You have to hit scan, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that topic was brought up earlier. I'm pretty sure they already said it's going to be hit scan 100%. But you have to have at least that opening when you release your shot of a red, whatever you want, a reticle.
Yeah.
And if it's not that, then it doesn't go through. Yeah. If you release it while the reticle is on a friendly target, it just doesn't do any damage to anyone. Oh yeah. That's what I would say.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it stopping the projectile. It doesn't go through them, but it doesn't do. There's no friendly fire. I don't want friendly fire.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think that there would be friendly damage. I am actually kind of concerned about the idea of that a friendly can stop the shot. Think about it this way, Fane. When you're playing Anna and you're trying to heal the frontline target and other teammates keep stepping in front of you and taking the heals that you're trying to get to the Reinhardt, that can be the difference between a win or a loss in a fight.
I will tell you this. No Lucio has ever jumped in front of me when I was nanoing. How dare you even accuse me of that? No Lucio's just come from the side.
No. You've intentionally nanoed Lucio's. Don't give me this shit.
Listen, we nano DPS, we nano tanks. I nano supports for equality. I'm just a good person here, Redbeard. I'm just trying to be a good person. But yeah, I mean, I think that being tactical with some of those things makes a lot of sense. Being adding a little bit more skill into it makes a lot of sense on the whole.
Yeah, and I mean, I think heals can also be something different than outgoing damage, right? Because then outgoing damage has to play more tactical. They have to get angles, get elevation, things like that to be more effective, as opposed to just literally sit right behind the tank and get free damage all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. I think that positioning, we talk about it a lot in shooters. The shooter I'm playing, Valorant, obviously, positioning is key. how much of this angle, there's a wall and I have some angle and you have some angle. How much angle can I take before you're taking the counter angle? And how can we balance for that stuff? So it's, I hope it's not to an extreme, but I would like to see a little bit of strategy put in there for sure.
All right, Thane, you had something.
I have something so big, guys. We're gonna get
my point didn't take us off on a tangent. Like, okay,
no, this is gonna go down. Okay, this isn't a tangent. This is just a deep road. So somebody who I already know is going to be not great at Ashes of Creation.
He's right here, Fane.
They put a question. Sorry, Grumpy. I'm sorry, Grumpy. I apologize. Chicken.
I was going with Baba.
It's Baba. So Baba put a question. It is the most upvoted question I've ever seen for a live stream, and it is really important. And we've been talking about it within Axiom all week long, and there are a variety of opinions on it. I mean, I thought it was pretty cut and dry, but there are a variety of opinions. So here's I'm going to read this question verbatim, and then I want to hit on a couple things that are not really something to address because it's just not true. And then I want to dive into the actual meat of the question. So the question verbatim is, will Ranger be required to carry arrows? It always seems like an interesting idea at first. Mostly it becomes a micromanagement nuisance, especially with the potential of open conflict lasting so long. It's also a cost sink that no other class has. Rangers will arguably use way more arrows than anyone else. He edited it, by the way, because I got on him about this. I think the fallacy here obviously is that Rangers use more arrows than anyone else. I think that anyone with a bow is going to use about the same amount of arrows if that's their primary, right? If you're a bow fighter.
I agree with the premise. Rangers will use more arrows than other classes.
How?
I think that is a fair assumption.
How?
Because the Ranger class is incentivizing the use of the bow. Because we will have these weapons that are kind of class staple weapons, but you can use whatever you want.
So the assumption of that, but if at the end of
that
the day,
is an assumption.
If I'm a fighter,
that's Steven's word saying that certain weapons will be tied to certain classes, and that
certain
the
weapons,
class will prefer to use those weapons.
A class will prefer to use those weapons, but at the end of the day, if for whatever reason I have built out a fighter and I use a longbow, and you have a ranger and you use a longbow, and we're both going around killing mobs, at the end of the day, our arrow usage should be roughly the same because we're going to use about the same amount of auto attacks, about the same amount of abilities, right?
But efficiency and effectiveness plays into that decision making. Just because some dumbass rolls warrior and uses a bow doesn't mean that that's going to be the general thing. I think it is a fair enough statement to say that Rangers will use bows more than other classes.
That is a fair
We're talking about 1-to-1 equivalent, like one Ranger versus one, say, fighter using a bow. Right.
So then the question still stands the statement within the question still stands, regardless of what outliers you have. Just because that person is essentially then opting into it at that point, because they're going against what the intended purpose is. And I know that the intended purpose is that anybody can use anything that they want. Mm-hmm. But now Steven has also recently said that there are classes that have preferred weapons. And so with that being the case, it's not use whatever you want. If it wasn't preferred weapons, I would agree with what you're saying 100%.
But viability existing. Yes, I would say that the massive Rangers versus the massive fighters, the Rangers will use more. To Barney's point, on a 1-to-1 basis, there could be the similar thing. I just think that getting away from the concept of this class is using this weapon and they are at a disadvantage, I don't think that necessarily puts the class at a disadvantage. I think there's ways to solve for that as well. Let's say the Ranger is at a disadvantage. Maybe the bow wears down at a quarter of the durability in use that a sword does, which actually makes a lot of sense, right? The sword, you lose durability a lot faster versus the bow because it's clanking against armor and clanking against minotaur skulls and all of those kind of things. So there is a very simple way to solve for that.
Yeah, and so the thing... I just don't like arrows in general. As so many people have said, it just becomes a micromanagement thing. It becomes a sync thing. But I kind of do like the option of specialty arrows sometimes, but then you kind of get into the point where you always want to bring those specialty arrows. But like, I do like that idea of like, oh, the fighter on the advance in a siege, right? They do break out their bow and they're shooting, certain types of arrows that will do different things. Maybe there's a type of arrow that breaks the tank shield stamina faster, right? So you're trying to break through their front tank line.
Yeah.
And so you have a group of 5, like a squad of 5 fighters, that their job as you advance in the siege is switch over to your bow, pull out your stunning arrows or whatever it is, and hit them.
Yeah.
So I kind of like some of that stuff, but I don't like just always have to have, ammo and spend money and micromanage.
We talked about that. A fighter that could have slow arrows that shoots a cobweb out. We've all seen that effect, and slows down a ranged character, and that can be how you help gap close. Is when they engage range, you engage range until you can get in a melee, and they have the advantage at range, but you have the advantage at melee, and then it's just a matter of who can gap close versus create distance themselves in the best way. But I think, Bardic, you really got to the key of the argument: ammunition. We all played New World. Was ammunition a fun system to engage with? Did you guys have fun? What's that?
They changed it. You now shoot a basic shot, and you can then bring better shit.
But before,
if you want to, but before, yeah,
before.
So even
before it sucked. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was the sole reason why I didn't play bow in New World. The only reason why I didn't play bow in New World is because I did not want to have to worry about micromanaging my arrows, especially once you got up to the Star Metal and Orichalcum level, because that shit got expensive fast.
Yeah.
And so, question, when they changed it, did it still become the standard that for like anything other than like basic farming, you had to bring good ammo anyway?
I don't know, because I didn't do group content within the change. So I don't know what the community standard was, but I can go ahead and assume that the answer to that is yes. Because even before that change was implemented, if you were bringing iron or steel arrows to an in-game dungeon, even within the old system, people would be like, what the fuck, why aren't you using Star Metal or Orichalcum? Or whatever the highest level of bow arrow was, if it was Orichalcum. But I 100% see that as being an issue. Absolutely. And so I had mentioned it in Axiom Discord earlier today. And my suggestion is that every single arrow, regardless of type, does the same amount of damage. Yeah. You have your basic arrow that does, let's say, 100 damage per hit, or that's the baseline of the arrow plus any ability and then stats, all of that. But the baseline is 100 for that arrow.
Yeah.
It does 100 basic physical damage. Makes sense. It's an arrow. It's physical. If I want to bring fire arrows, I can go to the archery trainer, whatever kind of system they want to put in place. Maybe it's a spell cast by a mage. That would be kind of fun for kind of interclass play. And they are able to change it to frost or fire or arcane or whatever. And when you do that, you then cannot change it for X amount of time. And so you are basically choosing what type you want to have for the battle that you are going into. And you're kind of stuck with that decision. That way that there's still that risk versus reward, and not just let me change it every 5 seconds, depending on whatever phase of the fight or whatever enemy I'm facing. But it still allows that playability the same way that a fighter does with a sword. And now the counter my own point there is, okay, the bow could be the provider of the fire damage versus the arrow. So why fuck with the arrow? But I think arrow play is fun. It's just not fun when it turns into a micromanaging thing.
Yeah. I could see the arrows being something special that you can have like one type of arrow equipped. You don't normally use it unless you like toggle a button. And that arrow, instead of just doing like a different type of damage, it does something special. Like as we talked about, like a stunning shot or something like that. Cause that could add different, like you're not going to want to use it all the time. Then you still have the risk versus reward, because you have to choose between a few different types of utility arrows that you want to use. That to me, I like a lot better, and then leave the type of damage to the bow itself.
A couple other ideas that were kind of floated out. I want to give you some of the ideas because we've had a lot of talk about this, and I want to get your guys' feedback on some of this stuff. So one of the ideas was exactly what Redbeard had said, is you have an arrow, it does 100 base damage no matter what, and you can equip fire arrows, and they still do 100 base damage unless your target is weak to fire, in which case it then has a multiplier. You can equip, so if I want to go after the ice dragon, I equip fire arrows. I have these fire arrows. Now that becomes still management because I need to keep fire and lightning and dark and light and holy and all. I have to keep 27 different flavors of arrows. I look like a fucking Baskin Robbins shop. You know what I'm saying? Like all the flavors of ice cream are laid out in front of me. That's not fun. That's more.
Can I get a sample of each?
Can I get one of each, please? I don't know this boss. Fire arrow, lightning arrow, ice. Oh, that one did more. That one did more, guys. That one did more. We're good. Yeah, and so it still becomes
to that point. What's the most annoying thing about that, in my opinion, is the lack then of inventory space. And now other classes have an advantage that aren't. I'll stay away from classes. Other people who don't use bows. Are at an advantage when it comes to inventory space because they don't have to hold all the extra shit, which was also something that you saw in New World because you never wanted to be the asshole that ran out of arrows or bullets.
Yeah, that was because it was awful. And now, first of all, if they do put ammunition, can we all agree that your bow shoots your basic attack no matter what? Can we all come to that agreement? If you run out of whatever
arrows for
at a minimum, I think all abilities should be usable no matter what. And then the arrows, the type of arrow is just kind of changing. Like Bard said, whether it's the type or whether it's an effect, it's essentially changing the flavor of the shot.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So if I run out of all arrows,
we all get vanilla, but if you want rainbow sherbet, you got to bring it with you.
That's
because if you run out of arrows, you're just a sitting duck at that point, and it's like, well, this just feels terrible.
Yeah, it's a bad feeling. You don't want to stop mid-fight and our ranger didn't bring enough arrows to the raid, so we have to go back and get more arrows for everyone to hold your position. It doesn't feel good, right? At some point, it doesn't feel good. The next thing that was brought up was the concept of quivers. And now some people talked about it in terms of the amount of arrows that you could hold in a slot. I think that's a very marginal argument one way or the other.
You're stacking quivers instead of
arrows.
Stacks of arrows at that point. It's the same thing.
Exactly. But here was a thought. I have a quiver equipped. That quiver has let's use the example of a fire quiver. That quiver can shoot 200 arrows. When that is done, it goes on a X amount of minute cooldown where I'm just shooting my regular arrows automatically, assuming I've done nothing. A 10-minute, a 15-minute cooldown. And then when it comes back up, it has lost a slight amount of durability. How do we feel about a system like that?
I don't like the time side of it because I feel like that is the type of... Now, I'm going to use the word time gate here and understand that it doesn't apply directly, but it feels the same way as a time gate where you just have this timer up in the screen somewhere preventing you from doing something. I would much rather it be a player decided to only, like, apples to apple or apples to oranges. If it was quiver with a cooldown or arrows and you have to bring however many you think you might need for the night, I would rather have the arrows because at least I, as the player, am choosing how many I'm bringing, what type I'm bringing, whatever the system is, versus I choose to use this one, and now I'm sitting here with my thumb up my ass for 15 minutes.
Well, you could bring two fire quivers and swap them out. You could bring an amount of fire quivers and swap them out in that system. It just allows
that would be more reasonable. That would be more. So you're just talking about from the side of not having to replenish arrows, like by running into town, you can wait, and so you're bringing 5 quivers or something like that to get you through the night.
It doesn't feel that different to me than just bringing arrows because you're still spending the money and the inventory space on all these quivers, right? Because if it loses durability, then you're spending money to get it repaired or whatever. So yeah, I'm not sure it feels that. What would you think about while a quiver is equipped, it restocks a special arrow like every 10 seconds? And so when you're ready to do big burst, you've dropped some cooldowns or you're trying to burst down an enemy, you toggle a button and you're using your special arrows. And then the rest of the time you're not using it. I mean, this still has a little bit of that thumb up your ass moment, but it's kind of, then becomes more of an ability. Like you're timing your abilities when to use it. And it only comes up when it's equipped. That way you don't run into that thing where you have like 50 million quivers and you just like because I don't want to be pulling up inventory mid-fight to switch quivers or anything like that either, or mid-siege. I'm not saying because obviously you can't switch in fight, but
Yeah.
I think that I like that idea because I feel as though it is reasonably fair and comparable to a tank and their shield.
yeah, the stamina from a shield,
right, and then that theoretically you're going to have to repair your shield probably more than anything else. At least in an action combat situation.
Yeah.
Theoretically. I like that idea more so about the like every 10 seconds one is replenished. So basically the baseline would be is a ranger with a bow without a quiver just shoots a basic shot.
Yes.
If you have a quiver applied to your character, equipped on your character, then that quiver is giving you the slow, the fire, the whatever kind of specialty stun shot, whatever it is, and you're pulling that from your quiver. So it's almost like you're magically pulling bows out of your ass for all of your for just kind of the basic shot. And I'm not just talking about the basic attack. I'm talking all abilities, basic shot. But then if you have that quiver on, I like that. And then they also replenishing, but then also getting durability loss on death or damage or just over time. And I actually think I really like
the amount replenished could be based on the quality of the effect, right? Like if you're getting
put a stat in that allows you to increase it.
Yeah, if you have stun arrows, it's replenishing 1 every 30 seconds, right? If you're just converting damage to fire and maybe getting a little extra fire damage from it, it's every 10 seconds, right?
So here's the underlying question to that scenario. Is it unreasonable to expect a ranger to have a quiver of every single damage type?
Is it unreasonable? I mean, for them to own it? No.
For them to have it in their storage in town and they pull the 3, 4, or 5 that they need for whatever given night.
I'm gonna bring in some CC stuff. We're going into the volcano. So I'm gonna bring some CC and I'm gonna bring some ice quivers, and that's it. That's all we really need, right?
I think it depends. Like, I wouldn't want you to have to own like that many. But I think owning a number makes sense because, like Steven has said, you're already going to have different gear types, and like everyone is going to have multiple gear sets for different things depending on what you're doing. So I don't think it's unreasonable. It's just figuring it out so the ranger isn't expected to carry 6 quivers with them at all times, right?
I mean, I think that's a concern for every single class, and so I think it puts it on equal footing, right? Like, it'll be an individual's choice at that point. Again, the player agency side of it of. Do I want to have all of these at my disposal? I mean, a tank could be thinking the same thing. Do I want to have every different type of shield I could possibly need at my disposal? Or do I want to specialize in these 3 or these 2? And that applies to all different weapons and armor based on resistances. Like that's you guys have been maxed MMOs before, and having a different set of gear depending on what you're doing, right? And I feel like with a sandbox type game, that list and that inventory becomes more expansive just at a baseline.
Yeah.
Because players can choose how far they want to take it. So I think I really like the system. I really think it would be something that could play out.
Do you like that system more than you just don't ever run out of ammunition? The damage of your arrow scales off your bow. The element of your arrow scales off your bow. The whatever the ability is, the slow, the lightning, the stun, whatever it is, scale is just coming from your bow, and you never have to worry about ammo ever.
I do, in the sense that it puts player agency into the quiver as opposed to the bow.
Okay.
Because if you don't have it on the quiver and you have it like what you're describing, Fane, is the same situation. It's just now I have 10 bows in my inventory instead of 10 quivers.
And I agree 100% with that. That's kind of why I had like suggested some sort of quiver as an augment. I mean, the quiver becomes essentially an item augment at this point because it feels bad where I have a bow that does 50 damage, and I just got a bow from a quest that does 150 damage, but it's ice, and I'm about to enter an area with a lot of ice, or I live in an area with a lot of ice, and so it's just not super effective, and I am using subpar equipment on a regular basis to mitigate for the factor that my better equipment just isn't right for the content I'm trying to do.
I would also say if we're thinking about this system, I would make the quiver something that takes a small investment in terms of like talent points to be able to use.
Mm-hmm.
That way, not like, because otherwise, as we already know, you have a melee and range slots, and you can swap between them as necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, unless that's changed since they said that. And I wouldn't want unless you are going for a bow build, whether you're ranger or something else, as we said, we'll have to see how it all works out in terms of whether any other builds can actually run a bow as their main weapon. But hey, if you invest a little bit into bows, into that talent tree for the weapons, then you get the quiver. And then it makes sense, as opposed to otherwise, yeah. Because like, especially if we're talking about a stun shot, right?
Yeah.
Every single class or every single player
I feel like
will have
stun
to
shot
have
would need to be an ability, not a type of
Yeah.
arrow. Like
I
I like
agree.
a frost arrow that maybe applies like a slow, but like a full on stun, I feel like needs to be its own ability on a cooldown because that's a
But
hard CC.
even a slow, like every fighter is going to take that, right, for gap closing.
So
And then you're going to be required to have a bow with that quiver for gap closing. And I don't want that unless you have invested into using bows, right?
And then you could reinvest into CC mitigation. So it becomes the meta. Everyone has the let's call it a frost arrow that slows versus an ice arrow that does ice damage. So the frost arrow slows you, but now everyone is invested into CC mitigation, and so the frost arrow falls out of meta because now we go to the fire arrow where it does a burn arrow. And it puts a dot on you, or a poison arrow that puts a dot on you. So, well, now I need to get more health to survive the dot, and so then it can rotate. And that's kind of how you rotate the meta naturally. Is you have two things that balance out. When they overcorrect for one, we go to the other. When they overcorrect for that, then we swing back.
I just don't like the idea of like even a tank having to carry a bow with a quiver and swap at times. I think tanks. Yeah, so only if you have invested to be ranged, bow DPS, do you end up with a quiver, and then it makes sense, and you're getting a slightly special ability from it.
Would you say it's comparable, and then if so, then potentially uneven? If I'm using a wand, do I have to invest enough into a wand to use a tome?
I think it depends what the tomes do, but yes. I mean, you can always take it, but it's not that good if you haven't invested into it, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like we need to try to normalize it across range, right? And the only other comparable example to kind of this two-piece ranged weapon is wand and tome, bow and quiver.
I mean, I think you can... So let's talk mage for a second. Because we are talking range combat, not necessarily ranger, even though ranger is coming up here. I think that you don't have to worry necessarily about the normalization because the wand can just do damage. And if you need those elemental procs, those will come from abilities, including CC procs, can very easily come from the ability set. And your limiting factor there doesn't need to necessarily be like a quiver because your limiting factor is mana. Right? You have a natural limiting factor already. And now making sure that those two are balanced, because I think that's when we look at balance, those are the two that we always look at for balance, right? Ranger and mage. How can I balance these two and make them both viable in terms of a magical versus a martial damage type? And I think you can balance that without necessarily having to equip a wand with a tome or a staff with a... there was somebody brought up the concept of runes, which were just like arrows. They were essentially magical arrows. It worked in the same way.
There was something in there that you said.
There's always something in what I said, Redbeard. Like that's what I just gotta
tell
you.
No, it popped in my head and then it fell out. Anyways, it'll come back to me. But I think kind of the concern for the quiver side of it is I feel like unless the quiver itself is baseline with the bow, then the quiver then can't be... It can be slightly impactful, but I don't think it can be overly impactful. Like, I like the idea of it kind of being gated a little bit by decision making and effort into going in and getting the quiver
Mm-hmm.
and having that unlocked, whether that's your primary weapon, secondary weapon, whatever. Maybe there's a declaration. Oh, and I remembered what it was. Maybe there's a declaration of kind of what your primary is for your class. And then if you choose your bow as your primary, regardless of what your class is, if you're fighter, but you declare bow as your primary, then maybe you unlock the quiver, kind of a thing. But if it's just your secondary, then you don't have access to the quiver, but you still have access to the bow. So you can't do the altered shot, but you can still have a ranged, thing attached to you. So,
or
so the thing that I remembered was, are we bumping up against the augment system by changing the typing based on the quiver? This is something that I feel like might be an issue, because if I am Ranger Mage and I choose the fire augment, so now my abilities are more so shooting fire shots. By having a quiver that allows me to quickly switch to frost, are we essentially nullifying an entire secondary subclass for Rangers? Potentially.
That is a super fair point, honestly. Is and then what takes effect? If I have a mage passive, so all my basic shots do fire damage, and then I have a quiver that's ice equipped. Do I also do ice damage? Do I do both types of damage? Because that's just not scalable and not fun, and just a really bad way to.
Do I double my ice damage? Do I double my fire damage if it's like fire and fire? I feel. But the concern is that it would essentially negate the need for a Ranger Mage, because the mage portion of the secondary, because it's only augmenting your abilities, it's not giving you new ones. That augment essentially becomes voided because you can get the same thing from your quivers, and so that's actually a little bit of a hole.
Yeah, but the augment doesn't just, like, my understanding is most of the time the augments also add a change to the ability, not just straight damage, right? All the examples we've been given add some kind of change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, it does fire damage when you take the fire augment for the charge, but it drops a trail of fire behind you, and that's how it does the fire damage. The ice damage, it does ice damage, but it also adds this type of slow. So as long as there is some kind of differentiation there in terms of like how powerful it is. The one thing that did cross my mind that we're talking about this, and I actually do really like this system, but Steven has also said he doesn't want abilities to ever come from items, and that's basically putting an ability on an item.
Yeah.
Although, as I said, if you spec into it and then you get the ability from the item, it kind of rides a weird fuzzy line, right? Like if you have to go down the bow tree with however many talent points, right, arbitrary amount, just trying to find a balanced amount till you get the quiver, then it kind of makes sense because you have invested in it, but you are still kind of getting an ability from a weapon.
Yeah. No, it's tough. I mean, it's very close either way, right? We don't want to step. I think ammunition and quivers can definitely step on the toes of the augment system. I think that was a big point that was brought up multiple times, and so I hope that we don't. I hope we don't see it. Hopefully, we just get straight up a brand new type of system. And if you can't figure out something that's really balanced, just your auto attack is your auto attack. It's fine. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. And I think that's kind of Occam's razor. That's sort of where it lands.
I have a question. Do you guys think, because he said we're not getting abilities from weapons, but do you think auto attacks based on how you spec into the tree will do different things? Or if you augment, like, can you augment an auto attack or anything like that? Like on your third hit, you get like a 25% slow for 1 second on someone?
I could see that being a talent that is taken in the probably a weapon tree as opposed to a class tree. But we actually kind of saw in Alpha 1 that whatever weapon you were using, you adapted that basic attack. So if that's what you were asking, like if I was a tank and I equipped a wand, I would still, like, I wouldn't go up and hit him with my wand.
Yeah. No, I know that. I'm just saying, like that's a perfect example. In the weapon tree, do you think there will be things that change how your auto attacks work? So, like, as I said, add a proc like if you land 3 attacks in a row, or, add a wider cleave to it on the third attack, or I keep going to the third attack. It could be like in any kind of combo.
No, that's fair. I think third attack is pretty standard. And if there is a proc, I think it's stuff like maybe third hit with a wand increases mana regeneration by 5% for 10 seconds or something like that. Like increasing, like you said, increasing the range or the spread, the cleave radius of a melee attack. Or doing a little bit more damage on the third or fourth hit or something. Like I would be okay with that. And I think that that's good. I think that that's a good system, because then it also incentivizes. It's less about, okay, I don't have resource, let me do my melee, or let me do my basic attack. It's my basic attack third hit gives me this proc. So now I'm kind of weaving this. It's a very basic combination system, but it adds depth to the rotation that we would see. Is, oh, this ability is about to come off cooldown. We'll use a mage, for example. This ability is about to come off cooldown. I'm going to do 3 basic attacks because that gives me a damage proc of 5% for 5, or for my next ability, or for 5 seconds, however they do it. And then I do that bigger ability. It allows people to kind of big brain a rotation and do certain things before they do other things to optimize their damage. And from somebody who's spent a lot of time from developing rotations in Star Wars: The Old Republic to just playing rotations that are already out there, it adds a level of depth that is something that I personally enjoy.
Yeah. So if we're having that, I almost opt for just no ammo needed. That's kind of like, that's where the depth comes in. You don't really need a quiver anymore. That also like adds an interesting risk to action combat, right? Because if you don't land that third attack, you don't get your buff, and then you just wasted. Like, even if you landed the first 2, like the reason you were doing the autos was to get the main thing was to get that third hit. And then like it also like this would come down to balancing whether you need to land all 3 hits, or if you just need to land the third hit to get the proc, or things like that.
Yeah, I'm going to take a different side to that. I don't think that anything should ever affect your basic attack. I think the auto attacks should be 100% the same, and then it allows all of the flavor to be put into the abilities and how you play the class and the passives and all of that. I would like to just see your auto attack just stays as basic as possible.
And so you'd want the variation and the potential like procs to just come from abilities.
Just come from
like
abilities, yeah.
So you have an ability, it costs mana, but you use it 3 times in a row and you get a buff. And like, I mean, it could be anything. Use it twice in a row, or, wait for a proc and then pop it and you get a buff, things like that. Just general rotation stuff.
General rotation stuff. I think that like your ability itself should just remain your ability. I don't know if it even necessarily should proc or push anything. And the only thing that should really be changed is your damage, not elementally or anything like that, but based on your weapon. So if I have a sword and I've equipped +10 sword damage, all of those kind of things, that's fine. I don't want to see like +25% speed on your auto attack. I don't want to see stuff like that. It just doesn't. It doesn't resonate with me. I think that we can leave everything else. We can, that can be our baseline, and the abilities can be kind of where we expound upon things.
I mean, I'd honestly be fine with either. I think both would be fun. It just comes down to making sure both sides are balanced, whichever way they go.
100%.
I think you have to be careful on. So I agree. Either side can be done, but I think how resource generation is looked at specifically to the wizard has to be taken into account. If most of the time you're using abilities, then there needs to be an effective way at regaining that resource. Or you're just sitting there with your thumb up your ass using your basic attack because you ran out of resources, and then that doesn't feel good. That's classic WoW type, DPSing, and that's boring as fuck. Like slow combat is not fun.
We also mentioned that wand attacks take mana. And so if the wand attacks are taking mana, abilities are taking mana, And then we, yeah, as you said, then we run into a situation where you're just sitting there waiting for mana to regen or whatever. Yeah. Or you have to bring 5 million mana pots, which are just their version of ammunition.
Well, and then the balance of the cooldown of the mana pot to the mana regeneration, and then it turns into, well, to play a wizard, you have to have 50% mana regen buff or something like that for it to even be viable, and then that's getting down the road of the game dictating what you do as opposed to the player choosing what they want to do.
100%. Yeah, the balancing on all that's gonna be really tough, and it is gonna take a lot of time. So hopefully we get into Alpha 2 in the next 72 hours or so. And
hey, you guys didn't get your emails for the spot testing?
Let me check.
Speaking of testing, if anybody got a Diablo 4 beta invite, hit me up if you're not interested in checking it out.
Guys, if anyone got a Diablo 4 beta invite, I would $5 and not give it to Redbeard.
I would never say that you should share your account information with me publicly.
He would never say that on two different live streaming platforms simultaneously on a Wednesday night. That would 100% never happen. You keep getting invited to the Druid. I don't know, by the way, if you guys saw Baba's message, but just for the sake of bringing it back to the original point, it was early November. November 2nd, the Cleric video was shown, November 2nd, 2020. So we got that like almost a year.
That's
before.
Almost 2 years ago.
That's almost 2 years ago. We're literally a year and change. It was almost a year before the A1, right? So it was, obviously they were hoping for it to be 6 months out. But if we're starting to get classes again, if we do get something a little bit more than just the basic attack of Ranger, what do you guys think? Are we getting close to A2? I mean, it feels like maybe we're 6 months out.
I'm even if we get a lot on Ranger itself, that is a very standalone system. For us to be on that content wave for getting closer to Alpha 2, I think we need what happened like last time, where they're like, here, we're going to have this exciting thing, and then they gave us like 10 other things on like clarifications and tightening up of systems. If we get a bunch of stuff outside of just Ranger on tightening things up, then I could be like, all right, I think we're getting into this content wave, and we'll be getting close. Well, it's all relative, but closer to Alpha 2.
We're in the ramp up phase. We're out of that, and we're in the ramp up phase. And once Alpha 2 goes live, I think you'll see a lot of people coming out of the woodwork and checking out the game, and it's going to be really, really exciting.
I can't wait.
All right, so final guesses: full Ranger or ranged combat? Redbeard.
Range combat.
Bardic.
I mean, I'm gonna go full Ranger, but like not all the abilities. I'd say like 5 to 10 of the abilities.
5 to 10 of the abilities. And guys, I am going to say that's our show for tonight. We really appreciate you all being here
already.
Thank you so much. We just absolute, complete and utter shout outs. We had a bunch of new chatters over on the YouTube side as well. Appreciate you guys. If you're on our Twitch, please go check out our YouTube. And if you're on the YouTube, please come check out our Twitch. Both of them are always live every Wednesday night for this kind of stuff. Appreciate the heck out of you. Let's go around and do some outros tonight. And let's start with Bardic.
All right, I'm Bardic. As soon as we get that content wave of the ramp up to Alpha 2, I'll be making at least one video a week, maybe 2, doing some live streams. We'll always be doing this show and just waiting.
All right, Redbeard.
Captain Redbeard here on Twitch and YouTube. YouTube content is basically non-existent right now. Wanting to, I mean, a lot of real life stuff going on, so haven't been focusing on that. Streaming every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday over on Twitch. 7 p.m. Central, playing a smattering of games. I've been on a little bit of a roguelike kick, Vampire Survivors, Soulstone, all that, those types of games. And still really looking forward to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when that comes out, doing the shiny only playthrough and hating my life while doing it.
You are going to hate your life.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that one big time.
Like 3 months later, you still won't have left the starter position.
Yeah. Did they come out and say that a shiny only playthrough was like the equivalent of cheating? Did that happen? Did I see this?
No. So they were talking about the basically there was a comment that was not represented correctly, that Nuzlocks were the same as hacking, but Nuzlocke is a community set of rules to play the standard version of Pokemon a different way. What the reference was is either the person who said that didn't understand what Nuzlocke was, but the Pokemon Company came out and clarified and said that they have no issue with Nuzlocks. They have issues with like actually modding the version of the game and all of that stuff, which people do for like the random different game types and like Small Ant does that type of stuff and whatnot. But no, Nuzlocking is fine. That's just a kind of it's like shiny hunting. There's kind of community preset rules to it.
That's fair. That's fair.
But if you actually hack the ROM and change it to incorporate those rules without you stipulating them yourself,
then they have an issue. Yeah. Don't mess with the game file is basically what they said.
Please don't mess with the game files, guys. And guys, I'm Fane. You can find me linktree/itsfane, itsfane.com. It's the easiest way to get there. We've got some other content coming out right now. We are doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, though I missed today. We're doing kind of MMO Mondays. We just played Fractured Online. It was a drag, not really fun. We're gonna do Ash Wednesdays, where we talk all things Ashes of Creation, and then probably FPS Fridays, where we can dive into some FPS gameplay. It is kind of my heart and soul, and you guys can watch me click some heads or get my head clicked. Either way. And with that, we are out. We will see you all on Friday. I'm sure we'll see you in the Ashes chat. I know I will be live this Friday. Are you guys going to be live this Friday?
7 p.m. Central. We'll be talking about the live stream for sure.
Deal.
I do not plan to because I have to work.
So. Bardic, you can meet Bardic in chat. In Ashes stream chat.
I'll
talk
be
to
in
Bardic.
Chat.
Hang out.
What time are you live, Fane?
I'm going to go live probably... The live stream's at 11 a.m. PST, so I'm probably going to go live around 8 a.m. PST. We'll do a little pre-show, a few hours talking about random stuff, going through some of the questions in the forums.
I'll probably come harass Fane. All
right, come harass Fane. I won't be drinking wine then. It'll probably be coffee, but we'll be in good shape. And with that, we have one thing left to say. Boys!